the fact that these things kept happening to you all your life
Yes.
is really kind of a good. I mean, it's really sort of the extremely unusual part of your life, right?
Yeah, it is. And my sister years ago told me that I was blessed. I said, how in the world? Michael, you should have been killed or died more times than I can ever want to think about. And she started naming off, and there was a few she didn't even know that I never told my family, especially going out in the ocean after people and stuff like, which I'll talk about later. So I don't know why these things happen to me because I was not a brave guy. I never have been. Uh, I had, to this day, nerve problems every once in a while, you know. But I learned that you have to try when you're in situations. And was it the smartest things to do? No. But I had to. Wasn't. I was not trying to be brave. I was not trying to impress. I came upon or was involved in a situation that I never dreamed I'd be in, but I knew I had to do something to help what was about to happen or happening. And sometimes the situations I did, I stopped the situations, or I tried to. Most of the time I was able to stop. Sometimes it turned bad on me, but at least what was happening stopped for them to concentrate on me. And by that time, everything has sort of panned out and things worked out.
So, tell us about a few incidents. Just try to just encapsulate for us what was going on that was life threatening,
Okay.
that are the adventures that you had that where you sort of got to, I remember a few,
Yeah.
right, myself. And so like the guy is pointing the gun in your face in the convenience store, right?
Oh,
And
he had a con. He admitted. I don't know if he ever went to the trial, but I was involved with it, so I was there. And he admitted that he was going to kill me. In fact, when he came out, he stuck the gun to my
well,
forehead.
tell us what happened.
Okay.
Just tell us the story.
Well, I had an incident. I had not been here very long. Moved from Florida to here, to Dallas, and moved in with a good buddy of mine, John Campbell, and
That's me.
that's you. And
we were roommates.
and so I had met a girl, and she had, and there was no cell phones, but she had asked for me to get her an Orange Crush. There's a 7-Eleven, but we lived in a gated community, but that store was there. And so I
It's right in
remember,
front.
yeah, and I remember I needed to go in and get it. So I did. And as I was going in, I felt something was wrong. And because when I pulled up, I got to pull right up to the door, really, but there was a car backed in, running, and I saw about that time a guy got right up to the door. He looked at me for a second and looked back to what he was doing. And I thought, none of my business. And I go in, and everybody, for some reason, now I know why, was at the cooler. So I went. That's where I was going to get that Orange Crush when I heard that horrible scream. And I looked at the other people. There was one guy actually trying to climb in the cooler, and the other guys dropped on the floor. I turned around and looked at the manager out front. You couldn't see him. Well, what happened was he was trained and he did the right thing. He dropped on the floor. So I've got that drink, and I started to open the door, and I remember that car was running when I went in, but I did not think a thing about it. And then as I opened that door, I looked, and there is this guy with the driver's door open, and there was a woman in there, and he's trying to pull her out, and she's fighting him. And I will never forget, she met my eyes, and I'm sure, without a doubt in my mind, I'm never going to forget that as long as I live. And this lady, later on, came to me, and we both talked about it. She was convinced, and he admitted he was high on drugs. He admitted he for sure was going to rape her, but he couldn't even say for sure he wouldn't kill her, which his lawyers just went nuts about. But and I looked at her, and her eyes met mine, and I realized I had to do something. I didn't want to. I was scared to death.
Well, so hold on. Go back just a second. You were at the cooler, right? You actually got the Orange Crush out of the cooler before you
Yes.
realized something was wrong?
No, I had already got the Orange Crush.
Yeah, and then you...
And I started and I saw them going nuts as I'm walking, and I looked up behind where the counter is for this guy.
The manager was gone.
Yeah, he was gone, but what I did know, he'd been trained.
And so what did you do with the Orange Crush?
I had it. I didn't take it outside because I had put it there.
You put it on the counter.
I put it on the
looking
counter.
for the manager. Okay.
Yeah. And that's when
that's when you realized something was
Well,
really...
I looked down, and he's down there, and he's telling me to, and I didn't know what he was trying to do. He was trying to tell me to get down.
Evidently, the guy had been in the store earlier threatening people with a gun.
Yeah. Well, I made it to the door, and the girl was fighting him and slapping him, and he's trying to pull her out of the car. But what I did not know is he had a gun. And so when I ran up just 2 or 3 feet to pull him off of her, just because it was the thing to do, no other reason. Racism was not involved, but during the trial that was brought up. I just did it because I saw that girl's eyes, and she zoomed in on my eyes, and the most horrifying, frightened look was in her eyes. And she's trying to slap this guy from getting in. And when her eyes gave me away, because I was at this point, I was hoping I could get to him before he turned completely around. Well, about that time he did, and that's when he stopped. He still had a part of her, but not enough to pull her out. And I stopped, and why I said these things, I have been asked so many times. I believe it was a religious reasoning for me to come out of that. Because when he turned up and looked at me, he gave her a little bit of not a strong hold that he had. And so I stopped and he had that gun right on me. So when I tried to stop, I went right up to his gun, and it was cocked already. And I told the girl, I yelled at the girl, remember what you see. And I don't know why. I was nobody to even remember these things. I don't know how they came out. I've been asked so many times about it. I don't know what made me say it. But I yelled at the girl, remember who he is and what. Also, he had a car. I said, and what he's driving. And he had it here. And the girl yelled, yes, I will. And this guy looked at me, looked at her, and he did this 2 or 3 times. I just assumed I was about to have my head blown off. That store had loose gravel in the parking lot, all the way up to the slab. And she jumped away, and he went and turned around and looked at me, and as he turned, he got on the gravel, and he slipped. As it turned out, that is when he nearly killed me. Because when that happened, he saw her run. He looked at me, looked at the girl, and then he did not get in her car. He ran around to his car, which was running, and it was backed in. Very convenient for him. come to find out that's the way robbers do, I guess. But he jumped in his car and sped away. Did it so fast that rocks were just showering down on everything. He gets on the road, and he actually was apprehended, and they got him. And I had told the girl, when all this going on, just remember what you see. That was pretty much all that happened at the store. They catch him. Just right after all this happened, they chased him down in his car. And I have to go to the police, go in the stations. They drill me about what happened, what made me do it. Their biggest thing was they couldn't understand why I would do it. I was not very big. There was nothing special about me at all, at all. I happened to be at that place. Do I regret helping? No. I would do it again. I would hope I would. I can't tell you 100% because you don't know until it's in front of you what you're going to do. It took nearly a year for it to go to trial. And the bad thing is, you have to go whether you want to or not, or whether you can get off work or not. You have to go downtown and be drilled on getting ready for the case to happen. So that was just used to drive me nuts having to go downtown and deal with it, but I did. Then it came time for the trial. And it just went on for a while. I mean, it was very painstaking. Well, then it came my time to give testimony. I was scared to death because I never done anything like that. And they drilled me. The DA turned out to be a great guy. I actually, for some reason, we kept in touch for a little while. He could not get over that a young guy would do that. And he told me that all the time. And how could I have not been killed? And that I remember telling him more than once, the man upstairs, there's no other reason, because this man admitted he was killing me. He was already waiting for the recoil. He said it, the recoil of the gun and the bullet hitting me in my head. So it was going to happen. But when she did that saved my life.
She broke away and ran.
That's right.
He turned, skidded on the gravel,
Yep.
and then at that point, what did you do? You backed away, didn't you?
I didn't know what to do. I
Were you
looked.
just standing there frozen, or did you back away?
I was backing, there was about 10 feet from where I was to the door. And there was one other thing I left out. Where we lived, we had a security guard. He was an older man. He saw the whole thing. But he did what he was trained to do. I learned that by being at court all the time, the whole time, listening to time and time again, everybody's reasoning and what they did. Well, his response, when you hear what he did what the company told him to. But I do know it bothered him for a long time that what he did and what the company had trained him to do. He dropped to the floor in that guard shack and locked the door. And so all those details, it was meant to be that I was there. And when I was scared, but I was also in shock because they wanted to know how and why I did what I did. And they, of course, during the trial brought up racism. They wanted to know why would I go through that when all these other grown-ups were hiding and dropping. I said, it was a reaction from me. It had nothing to do with black. It had nothing to do with white. It was the situation, and I did what I did because I thought I had to. It was something that I had no doubt in my mind he was going to do these things that he admitted he was going to do. And so I have lived my life And there's been other situations. And I remember all these situations, and I go back to that one because that's when it started, these things that I had to get involved with. I'm no more a brave guy. I do not want to be involved in situations. But for some reason, this has been going on all through my life.
So yeah, I don't think it started with that, with the convenience store. It was just another
Another one. You're
episode.
right. It
So
was.
yeah, you had many episodes before
Yes,
that
yes.
where with with the school, with the parties that were going on back then, with the
Yes.
race riots that were going on, with the swamp and the, I think that swamp played a
big
role in your a near death experience twice in your life, right? Didn't you were out with your brothers, and didn't you have on a pair of boots that's when you got in the water they
I
sunk you
haven't
to the
told
bottom?
that yet, but you're right. My
Yeah,
older
so
brother.
yeah, so it was something that it's just you, and it's not the whole time I've known you. There's always been things like this happening, and it's just the way that you're, it's just the way your life goes. it, it's certainly not boring, as your roommate. I was never bored because there was always something going on. It wasn't always things happening to you. There was things happening with you all the time too. But you
Yes.
always were sort of like the center of activity, right? Whether it's women or partying. When you were the manager over at the merry-go-round, where that one guy took you out to the fields, and next thing you know, you're in the middle of a dope deal, had no idea, and then boom, it happens. And so there's been things happening with you all your life,
Well,
and I think you just
that's
have to treat it as this is the way that I am.
Well, that made me realize, I'm glad you brought that up, is I work for a national clothing chain, and I got to where I had to go around and look at the stores, different locations, typical job. And the situation where a guy, I would have to talk, the problem is, it's not a problem at all. Most of the stores had women working, mostly women. And mostly, not that I had anything to do with it, it was just the way things worked out. Most of the women at work were very attractive women. And my job was to keep things rolling, make sure there's no difficulties, and make money for the company. Well, we had a situation with a young lady that tried to bring race into the situation that she had done, and was not a good thing what she did, and it deserved for her to be terminated. Well, again, I was trying to make it as nice and as possible. And so I'm going out to my car, and all of a sudden, a car pulls up left or right. I said, get in. I had no choice. They had guns. And the car, I got out of my car, and they put me in this car. There's 2 or 3 people there. And they told me to shut up. And I couldn't see. I could not, I don't even remember if it was a cloth or what, but I did not know where we were going. And in Florida, southern Florida, it's sort of like in Cuba, you never want to be told you go into the King's Field because you're not coming back. Well, they told me we're going to the orange groves. And that's where a lot of bad things happen to people, and they would leave whatever they were doing that's bad and leave it there. And when I heard the orange grove, that's what got me. And it was a horrible thing. But I had a good person there in that group that at the time didn't realize who it was. Well, when he did, I was beyond myself. I was sort of numb of what was about to happen. Wasn't like I was trying to be brave. I was just in shock. But that guy saw me. And we were already in the grove. And when they pick the oranges, you have to have a pretty wide area between the trees to get the fruit, because they have these automatic pickers. Well, he stopped it and said, "Wait a minute, this guy's not that way. I know him." In fact, he actually said, "He is a friend of mine." And boy, he said, "I'm telling you, not this guy." They cussed and they did this, and I had put to my head a couple of times. But the good thing is he talked sense into him. And they actually took me back. I thought they were just going to throw me outside the road. But took me back, not to my car, but took me back to the parking area where I could get out. Even when I was getting out, I was afraid I was about to be shot. One part of me wanted to run, but I was afraid that would just make them go insanely mad and they shoot me. So they drove away. I was so shook up I couldn't drive. I remember starting my car, locking the doors, and putting my head on the steering wheel. And that's when I realized, how did I get through this one? This situation, and I started thinking, I hope this is not the way my life is going to be. Because I'm not a brave guy, I'm not a strong guy, I'm just a guy. But these things like this that we have stated earlier just kept coming. And one of the stores, one of the other stores I walked into, the Tampa Bay Mall location, I'll never forget it. And it was on the top floor. And I walked in, and the dress racks, there was a guy and a girl, and they were beating up on the manager. And she was a lady too, never forget it. And I rushed in, probably what I had rushed in, because she was so close to the edge of the hallway at that store. So I was afraid. So I ran up, grabbed the guy, pulled him aside, didn't know who he was, didn't care. I just knew he was threatening somebody at work for me, and it was bad. And they had these dress racks that he had already turned over, threw over. The young lady manager had bruises all over her body from being thrown into those racks. And I knew her, I knew her husband. It was just a bad situation. Well, I grabbed him and threw him around and told him to stop. He went crazy. He rushed me. We both went into the racks, and I was very lucky. I hit him once, and that once made him not as effective. So unfortunately for me and him, I finished it. Not any other reason other than I was scared and it had to be over. So I hit him where I knew I had to. Police came, they arrested him. And that was it, I thought. Well, the guy put it out there that they were going to get me. And they actually had it planned. And the other lady that was there came to me and said, "It is set and planned, Michael. When you go to your car tonight, they already know what your car is and where you're at. They're going to get you, and it's going to be bad. So you need to run." And so I couldn't believe it. And I was scared, very, very scared. I didn't know what to do. I knew if I called corporate, God knows what was going to happen. I knew what was going to happen. I just didn't know where. But what happened was the security man, his boss came by. We'd already filled out the stuff about it. And he goes, "Can you get off work for a little bit?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Do you have any cash on you?" I said, "I don't know. How much you mean?" He told me the amount. I said, "Yeah." He says, "Let's go." I said, "Where are we going?" I want you to go someplace with me. Don't worry, it's nothing bad. And he took me to a place, and it was a gun shop. I said, what is this? He goes, you're going to get a gun. Because, son, it's going to happen. As bad, as ruthless and sensitive as it is, this happens all the time. When you picked up, he knew who this person was. He had a rap, he'd been in prison. And he says, the policeman said, they're going to shoot you down. And you're not going to have a chance. Because there'd probably be 2 cars full of people. And their job is to kill you. So I was like, oh my God. So he took me to their indoor range and showed me how to do things. Movement, which way to go, left, right. Make sure the gun was in my hand. Don't worry about you just make sure it's in your hand. Because that's the only chance you're going to have. We can't be with you all the time. Because what's going to happen is we're going to be mandatory. Walk with you to your car when you're shifted, when your guy's getting ready to close. And the cars are going to be in the parking lot. And we can watch 2 or 3 nights, and which will be standard, but we can't do it all the time. So, be ready. And I was scared to death. Oh boy, I prayed. I thought, why did I have this happen to me? Another situation I did not want to be in. And so, a little bit before, I'm sweating bad. And this guy comes in. And I knew him because his girlfriend was the manager of that particular store. And the mall was a really big one there in Tampa. And he came up and he said, Michael, let's go in the back room. And I said, oh, okay. I don't know what all's going on. He pulled out this pistol. You know, it was a big pistol. At that point in time, I knew nothing about guns hardly. He goes, I want you to wear this. Oh, I'm not wear it, but have it. Tuck it here. Pull your shirt tail out. But I'm also going to do something else. I said, what are you going to do? He goes, I'm about to let the person know that you are my friend and nothing ever better happened to you concerning any of this here. I said, well, what makes you think he's going to listen? And he looked at me, he goes, Michael, I don't know if you knew or know that I was in prison. I said, yeah. And you still hired he called lady. I said, yeah. You realize how unbelievable that was, what you did, knowing what you did, and the fact that the young lady that was being assaulted by him was a woman of color. He's a woman of color. But you still went in and did it. So I can tell you right now, nobody's going to mess with you now. And I looked at him and I went, I felt like 1,000-pound weight was off of me, but I also was emotionally spent from the last couple of days. And he goes, and there's something else about him I've got, and he knows I've got it. I said, what is that? I was in prison same time, same place, real close to where his cell was. Michael, I know he was turned in, and I'll never forget this phrase because at the time, I know I sound naive, but he was this one leader of that cell block. He said he was his bitch, and I said, what? And he told me what that meant. I said, oh, good. And he knows, I know, and he knows that also I got people a lot more than what he does. So he's never going to come back to and see you or cause any problems. I said, how can you be so sure? He goes, I am part of the streets, and nothing's going to break that, because it's sort of like an unsecure bond that you know something about that person, and as long as you do what you're supposed to do, it's never going to go anywhere. And I said, and you think that? He goes, I do. And also, just to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to happen, we're going to be in 2 cars. And so that came, and I was told I would never know what night that is. So I went, and I always like to meet somewhere in the Tampa area, one of the stores, and a lot of them was managers were women, and that one particular one, I went there, and this guy pulled up and said, "Everything's handled, Michael. You're safe. Nobody's going to bother you in this matter." And I said, "How do you know?" He goes, "I know." And later he actually told me about what all went down and how close it was. I was not going to be shot. I was going to be tortured. And he started telling me what they tortured. It's unbelievable. That's how they were going to terminate that person. You were not going to die quick. So I was thanking God, thinking to have met this man. And when I left that company, I made sure I could never see him again, but I left 3 or 4 different people to tell him that I owe him my life.